guys, welcome to the Disciplined Life podcast where we talk all about power differential relationships and domestic discipline. I'm Arya and this is my husband Coda.
Hello, everyone.
And on today's episode, we are talking about a topic that doesn't get discussed in the realm of domestic discipline very often, and that is the topic of safe words.
Safe words. Yes, it is.
So I guess the first thing that we should establish is, what is a safe word?
Boy, I should have had a Webster dictionary. Wait, that's old school. I just made myself sound really old school with the Webster thing. I should have had probably a dictionary definition ready for this, right?
Not necessarily. Why don't you just tell us what your definition of a safe word is?
Okay, it is a word that we use in domestic discipline to signify to the person who is giving the punishment. I'm going off the cuff here. Let them know to stop whatever is happening. How did I do?
Well, that is one definition for sure. Oh my goodness.
I went off the top of my head.
I think we're a little off the cuff today. Really, safe words don't even have to be words. Did you realize that?
I did not, actually. I'm glad you brought this up.
So safe words really, they're not used exclusively in domestic discipline. And in fact, a lot of people that practice domestic discipline don't use them. I don't necessarily think that's a good idea, and we'll go more into that. But a safe word is used between a couple who are doing any type of power differential activities. Whether that's in the bedroom or through discipline or whatnot. And it is a word or phrase that is used to signal that the submissive partner, the one who is taking sensation, is at a limit or is needing to take a break or just needs things to stop or pause. And when I say
your definition was so much better than mine.
And when I say it doesn't have to be a word, is some people will use hand signals, some people will use gestures, tapping a foot, or, a hand signal, or any number of things that make sense for their situation and what's going on. Now, the reason I say that this is not necessarily something that is used in domestic discipline a lot is because I feel like there is a kind of a assumption within domestic discipline that you negotiated the terms of your agreement, you've decided on rules, you've decided on punishments, so if you go against those rules, you earn a punishment. You then have to take that punishment. And the dominant person, the husband, is the one giving the punishment, and he doesn't have to listen to his wife and listen to her feedback in that moment that, he's delving out the punishment how he sees fit. However, that can lead to problems. That can lead to breakdown.
That's true. Before we started this, by the way, before we started this podcast, I told my wife, I said, I'm going to try to contribute as much as possible, but she clearly knows a lot more about safe words than I do. And but I would say, too, just to bring up our relationship, we've had safe words, but would you say that we've ever had a breakdown because we didn't have one in place or we didn't use it in the right way? Because honestly, the reason I say this is because I can't remember.
Well, the way our relationship progressed is we were using, some more we were having some bedroom activities that we had already established the use of a safe word, before we established domestic
Right.
discipline.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
And so, but there has never been a time that I have needed to or wanted to use a safe word during punishment.
Right.
However, there have been times that I've stopped
Yeah.
a spanking,
Right. Yeah.
a domestic discipline spanking. There have been times that I have stopped that, but I didn't use our safe word, and so that's not
No, that's
good
true.
on
And
me.
I was just thinking that. No, but I don't know, again, if we had for something like that, if we had established the punishment or not. Do you know what I'm saying? Or not punishment, excuse me, safe word. We had established the safe word.
Okay, I was confused for a minute. I was like, wait.
Safe word during a reset, I think, is what it was, not necessarily a punishment.
I can't remember. Yeah, I think it was a maintenance spanking where I basically stopped things and said, hey, I'm not in a good headspace. And that's really what safe words are. They're
Yeah.
just there to say, hey, I'm not in a good headspace, or something is going on with me, either physically or emotionally, that I need to take a break and I need to stop and we need to talk about this.
Right.
So how do you establish safe words? Would be the next question to ask.
Yeah, because I'm sure they're wondering that. Okay. Well, it probably starts with a conversation.
Yep. Most things go back to good old fashioned communication.
Sorry, that was very sarcastic. I apologize.
Most things do go back to communication, though, and really being open. And I think that when you're establishing your DD relationship, you sit down, you negotiate the rules, you negotiate the expectations, you negotiate punishments, and you should establish a safe word. Now, common safe words are either red or, some people just use safe word as the safe word.
That's like using password as your password. That's like a horrible thing to do.
It's not horrible in this context, though. Just something that you would not use normally. So you can establish that no means no, stop means stop. And so some people do say, stop is a safe word.
Right.
However, if you're in a context where you're like, when I'm getting spanked, I might say stop or no, I can't take it. And those don't necessarily mean that I actually need you to stop. And so you might establish a word that would not organically come up. There's a whole lot of memes out there about pineapple being a safe word. There's a whole lot of jokes about, something like that.
Sorry, if you're listening to this and your safe word is pineapple, I apologize for laughing.
Well, no, it's become an internet joke, right?
Yeah.
But it's just a word or a phrase that would not come up organically, that would signal and be understood that things need to pause, things need to stop. And you just establish what that is. And, I know some couples, we haven't done this necessarily, but some couples will do some training for safe words and basically say, we're going to go into a session with the intention of going too far until the submissive person uses the safe word. And we've never done that, and that's not necessarily something that I think is universally good advice, but it's not bad advice either if you think that it would
that's
be helpful.
In just thinking of in that, I think that's a very important thing to establish with people. Like when you establish the safe word, and let me know if I'm jumping ahead here. When you establish the safe word, use it. Don't just,
Well, I was going to say, I've never used a safe word during punishment, so I wouldn't say universally you should use it. It should be an option. It should always be an option.
Yes.
But as a man, as the dominant partner in this relationship, your goal should be to never get me to the point where I need to use it.
No, that's true, and that's the other thing that I was going to bring up. Actually, was my goal always, and I hope that we have always talked. We've talked about this before, and in our own relationship, obviously. But I never. I really try hard not to get to that point, and that's why. Hopefully, wouldn't you say it's only happened maybe once, twice?
There's only been, in our DD aspect of our relationship, there's only been twice that I have stopped
That's what I thought. Yeah.
maintenance.
Uh-huh.
And I think that just goes to, like, when you establish safe words, when you establish this dynamic where, you know, there is still a certain level of autonomy and consent even during a spanking, there's responsibility that goes along with that.
Yes. Yeah.
And as a woman, I'm responsible to, number one, communicate to you before we start a session to make sure that that you and I, but especially on my end, that I'm in a good headspace to receive discipline or receive maintenance.
Yes.
Also, if I feel like there's any emotional barriers between us, if there's anything going on with us relationship-wise, or you personally or me personally, that needs to be resolved before we go into that.
Which, by the way, just if we can camp there just for a second, that's happened before.
Yes, I have a whole article about that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Sorry. I remember that because boy, I don't know how much I want to comment on
like
that because
that
I'm not sure that was my finest hour there.
That article can be found on the Traditional Domestic Discipline Substack and will also be posted on our Patreon.
Okay.
Nice little plug.
There you go.
And so, but it's my responsibility to not only check in with you before the session, but also give necessary feedback during the session.
Yeah, that's true too.
And it's my responsibility to use a safe word if I absolutely need to, but also not abuse the system of safe words as a means to get out of a punishment or get out of an uncomfortable sensation.
Which, by the way, let me just, for the listening audience, you've done a good job of.
Well, thank you. And I think that comes back down to just accepting responsibility. If I have broken a rule, if I have earned a punishment, then I really do accept that, and I accept the consequences for that. And that way, you know, I'm not going to safe word just because a punishment happens to be painful, because that's kind of par for the course.
That's the point.
Right? And so, in our maintenance sessions too, they are not painful. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
They're not as bad as
a punishment. I was going to say
they're not as intense as punishments, but they are still hard to take sometimes, and they can get very intense depending on what is going on.
And in fact, we have sometimes delayed a reset because it's been a little sore afterwards. Which, by the way, I just want to establish, like, that's okay to do. That's all right.
I would say and this has not come up for us, but let's say that I earned a punishment and the very next day I broke another rule and needed to be punished again with a spanking. You wouldn't delay another punishment just because I'm sore from the day before.
That's correct.
Okay. I was like, that really hasn't come up.
No, that's correct.
And so punishment would be like the caveat there where it's like, hey, if you're sore, you should have thought about that before you decided to go against the rules again.
Yeah.
But maintenance is different because it's not something that's earned. It's something that we just schedule.
Yeah.
And it is good. And we're going to go into maintenance in another episode.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go off on that tangent.
I was like, we don't need to delve too far. But just, there's more leeway with maintenance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, as a woman, I'm responsible to not misuse the safe words. I'm responsible to use them if necessary for communication. Um, but on your end, as my husband, and for men out there listening, you have some responsibility around safe words too.
Yeah. And well, um, and that is that you need to stop when the safe word is used. Um, and I know that sounds probably obvious. Like some people are just rolled their eyes or like, okay, yeah, isn't that fairly obvious that you're supposed to stop when a safe word is used? But there is probably, and maybe you can fill me in on, you maybe have heard some horror stories where the safe word's used and things continue.
I have not really read anything about that from a DD
Oh,
context, but
that's
I
good.
have
That's
read,
good.
well, because I really haven't read anything about safe words being commonly used within a DD
Oh,
context.
right.
And so this subject really is kind of missing in the conversation of domestic discipline, in my opinion.
That's true. That's probably true. And so, again, that sounds fairly obvious, but I really try to, and I hope that you would agree. I really try to pay attention to your, especially when we're doing a reset. I mean, yes, and a punishment as well, but a reset, I really try to pay attention to your demeanor and everything else because I want to make sure that the reset is being effective, but it's not being misused because we don't want it to be a punishment either. And so I really try to gauge. And you and I, when you mentioned we had conversations, we try to have a lot of conversations about if this is how the reset went, and even before the reset, what the goals are, and all those kind of things, and just establish it so that hopefully a safe word is not being used. But if it is used, I'm not surprised by it. Like it doesn't take me by off guard or by surprise.
Right, because we use the term reset as to be synonymous with maintenance, but also that's just a blanket term that we use for any spanking that's not a punishment.
Yeah, right.
And there are some times where it's like, hey, you haven't had a spanking in a while. Let's just do a reset of maintenance just to kind of keep everything on track. Those are usually fairly short, fairly light.
Yeah.
But there are times where I'm like, I am carrying a lot of stress and a lot of emotional heaviness, and I need to be able to get rid of that. And we use maintenance for that as well, because typically, if I carry too much stress, if I carry too much emotional heaviness on me, that's when I get really, really disrespectful, potentially. And if we can say, hey, let's have an intense maintenance spanking to help alleviate all that stress, then I can avoid an actual punishment spanking that would be worse.
Worse. Right. Right.
But to come back, yeah, when a safe word's used, you should stop. You should check in.
Yeah.
You should see what's going on. Because sometimes I've called it because I'm just like, hey, I'm kind of irritated, I'm kind of mad, and I'm just not receiving this maintenance very well at all.
It's not working. Yeah.
Right. Because of my emotional state.
Yeah.
And, or sometimes a safe word is used because it's like, hey, and this has happened. This is separate from the two that I've remembered completely stopping.
Okay.
Where we were in a maintenance and it felt like the physical sensation of the spanking felt very, very intense and very hard to take. And I remember you stopped and I just started crying. I was like, I don't feel like this is fair. I haven't done anything wrong. And you actually stopped the spanking for a moment.
I did. Yeah.
And so sometimes the spanking stops because it's too much physically. Sometimes it stops because it's too much emotionally. whatever the reason is you need to stop and try to figure out what's going on and see what needs to happen. What's the next step?
Like reevaluate what's going on.
Because there was one, and now we're talking about maintenance spankings. We're not talking about punishments, and I feel like the conversation would be a little different. But there was one spanking that we stopped, and we just stopped. We were just done.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what that was.
We were both really frustrated,
Oh.
and we just decided that we needed to call it.
That was a long time ago,
That
though,
was a
wasn't
long
it?
time ago.
Okay, that's why I'm having a hard time
And we actually
with that, because I was like, that had to be a long time ago.
And we actually ended up pausing our domestic discipline dynamic for like a couple of weeks after that.
By the way, I think that's something good to talk about. Let me know if this is going off too much off subject, but sometimes you need to take some time.
Oh yeah, and we're gonna have a whole episode. I don't know exactly when, but it is in the list,
queue.
the queue of topics to talk about when and how to put a pause on your dynamic. And so just because a safe word is used doesn't mean that the spanking's over.
Yes.
Especially if it's a punishment, because punishments have been earned
Yes.
and they need to be administered. But even during a punishment, if a safe word is used, you need to stop. You need to figure out what's going on, and you need to decide how to proceed.
And I just wanted to say something there, because other than that one time we just mentioned, the other two times that I believe that we used the safety word, yeah, we didn't stop. We had a moment to like regroup, and then we started again. But again, they weren't punishments. I'm pretty sure they were resets.
They were maintenance spankings, and we stopped one time. We basically like stopped. We talked about it. You put me in the corner for a while, and then we came back to it once we both had some time.
I remember this now. That's right.
And then one time, and then the time that I was talking about where I was just having a hard time taking the physical sensation, and it felt more like a punishment, and and when I say that I started crying, it was more of just like the emotional, like I don't feel like I did anything wrong, and I feel like I'm being punished. And you needed to pause and just tell me, like, you reassured me, like, this isn't a punishment. This is supposed to be a reset. So let's take a minute and just talk about this. And that's all it took was, I think, you took me off your lap, you had me kneeling in front of you, and you talked to me for all of about 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, it wasn't too long.
And then we started again immediately.
That's correct. Yeah.
And we had a successful conclusion to that. But if it's a punishment, you do need to make sure that you conclude that punishment, but that doesn't mean that you can't take a pause, that you can't check in. You may decide to, take some time with some corner time before coming back and finishing the punishment.
That's true.
It could just be too much at that time, and you need to, give her a little bit of a break, 10, 15 minutes in the corner, then come back to it. Or you may decide, you can start back right away, but maybe pace out your spanking a little bit differently to where you're giving more recovery between swats. You may decide that we're done for today and we'll conclude the rest of your punishment the next day.
Yeah.
All of those are options, but you need to take that time to check in and not just say, nope, you earned this, and keep on going the way you want without giving any respect to her communication.
And let me just say, for those in the audience, or the listeners rather, who are listening, I'm not gonna pretend to tell you that it's been. I want to be very careful how I say this, because I don't ever want my wife to think that she was a problem. But it's not necessarily easy to stop, take that time, be patient, to be gracious, and to stop to reestablish what's going on and then begin again. That is really hard, but the thing that keeps me going, the thing that helps me remember or keep myself under control, that's what I'm trying to say, if there happens to be an annoyance. But by the way, during these maintenances, I was not annoyed. But if there happened to be one, you
There
need
was
to...
one you were annoyed.
That's right, right. Uh, and but and it's okay to have that emotion. Like I'm not saying not to have it, but you need to get that emotion under control and remember why it is what you're doing. Be patient, be gracious, reestablish that when the safe word is used, and continue. Because the annoyance usually comes from a selfish place. And what I mean by that is, at least for me, it comes from a selfish place because it's like, not all the time, but it's very, very rare, but sometimes I'm tired and I'm just like, I just want this maintenance baking to be done. Why can't we just have this? And I'm sorry if I'm going too far off track of something here, but I just wanted to say this, that you have to get yourself in check and say, no, the reason we're doing this is to help our relationship, to help my spouse in this, and so that I need to suck it up, do what needs to be done, lead. That's the whole reason we're doing this in the first place, is so I lead, and finish this out to where it benefits our relationship, it benefits her, and that may take a moment too. But take that moment and get your emotions under control. Again, it's not bad to have the emotion. It's bad when you allow the emotion to overcome what's going on.
Well, that's right, because in domestic discipline, spankings are given with purpose. Whether that purpose is maintenance, stress relief, a warning, or a punishment, it's always given with purpose. And so you should always have a purpose and a why behind any spanking that happens. And if your purpose is because you're really, really irritated and you want to take your aggression out on your wife, that's not domestic discipline any longer.
Exactly. Now we're getting into the territory of abuse. So.
And so if you're annoyed, if you're feeling frustrated, you need to stop and work through that before you continue. And I think that that's another great point that wasn't really on our radar when we started this conversation, is while the act of using a safe word is more the responsibility of the wife or the submissive partner, the husband, the dominant partner, can in essence use a safe word too. It's not going to be an auditory thing. He doesn't need to communicate that, but he can recognize within himself that he needs to take a break and pause.
Yes. And correct me if I'm wrong, one of those resets was me taking a pause, wasn't it? Or no?
The one that I had talked about where I was having a hard time with the physical sensation.
Right.
You were the one that initiated that pause.
That's right. I did, because that was a moment where I was like, okay, I'm about to lose it. I need to.
You were frustrated with me?
Well, I was. No, I don't think that's the right emotion. What I'm trying to say is that I needed to. I just remember in that moment, I don't remember the exact emotion, but I remember the thought process. I needed to refocus in order to help you. I needed to get my mind right. So I needed to take a moment, refocus, and then continue.
Now, the one where we just called it and we ended up taking a break from our dynamic for a few weeks and like pausing everything, we were both very frustrated.
Yes. Now that's the one that I was like, I think I'm mixing the two, not on purpose, but mixing the two. But I remember the thought process of the other one, not necessarily the emotion.
For that one, I did it. I was the one that initiated stopping the spanking, but we were both extremely frustrated.
Yeah, and again, this is something that we've talked about already in some past episodes, but I want to say it again. Just because that may happen, don't throw in the towel. Like, we didn't throw in the towel on this just because that happened. We just took some time to try and figure out, okay, how is this going to work? How can we make this work better?
Right, because I mean, we took a break from our dynamic, and I will say, at least on my end, I really thought during that break, I was like, is this something that is beneficial to continue in our relationship?
That's true. Yeah.
And I took some time to do more research and reaffirm whether or not this was something that I wanted to continue to do, or if we needed to come back together and that conversation was going to be me saying, I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we didn't, obviously.
Obviously.
But I just remember during that time, I also started journaling, and this is really where I started writing about domestic discipline, because I wrote you basically a how-to manual for, and not because
Yeah. No, I'm just laughing because I'm like, oh, yeah, remember this. Yep.
I was about to say, and that sounds so presumptuous that I would tell my husband how to lead. But you really wanted that information. Like, you needed that direction from me to say, hey, this is what I am needing from you, and this is what I picture that looking like.
Yeah, and that's what I would say is I don't think it was you telling me how to lead. It was you letting me into your head, letting me into to try to help me understand what you needed in order to succeed.
Now, and you were able to take that information and decide how to apply it, because you could have
Yes.
said, no, I'm not doing any of that. Or you could have done what you did, which is, okay, I hear you. I'm not doing this, like, I'm not doing that to the letter, but I will take that and apply it in a way that makes sense for me.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what you ended up doing. And we started back our domestic discipline journey. To reestablish our relationship in this way after that.
Yeah, and so I think it's good that we told that story so that people get an idea to say, okay, it hasn't been just wine and roses for them. They've had to really take some time and think about it and take time to communicate. And like I just established, it wasn't like you gave me this manual, as you put it, to tell me this is how you're going to do it. No, it was like, I'm letting you into what I really need and how I think you could go about it in order to help me, because that's where some of the frustration came out of, is I didn't know exactly 100% what you needed and how you needed it.
Well, and I think in that journal, when we had that happen, I was able to really communicate with you how I viewed the role of maintenance in our relationship, and how I viewed the roles that we each held, and the level of importance that holds for me personally. And I think that you just didn't understand my perspective. So when things would go awry, you were like, why is she making such a big deal out of this?
Right. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
So all that to say, it is perfectly okay to take a break if you need to take a break, to reestablish, to recommunicate. And the reason I wrote those things out, and the reason I used a journal and still do in some instances, these conversations are hard.
Yes, they are.
And they're hard to think about all the things that you want to say. And then when you're actually saying them, it's hard to get those words to come out, especially if you are especially sensitive to the approval of your partner, right? I don't want to say things that are going to upset him. And those things are just, they're really, really hard to say. And sometimes writing them out, even if I know he's going to read them, but I can write them out. I can make sure like all of my thoughts are out on the page. I can explain myself. I can just pour my heart out onto that page and know he's going to read it. He reads it, and then we can have a discussion because he has a base knowledge of all of the things I'm saying. Because that's my problem, is I will kind of word vomit to you when we're talking, and it's because I have the context, but I haven't given you the context. And
Correct.
by writing things out, I'm able to give you that context so that we can have a productive conversation. And I would really suggest that if a safe word has to be used, follow up. Follow up with that and just be like, hey, what, you used your safe word. We talked through it. We finished out the maintenance or the discipline. But what was going on? Why did you feel you needed to use a safe word? How can we avoid that next time? Because really the goal should be to avoid the need for safe words if possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, since we've had that conversation, I think it hasn't happened. Has it maybe happened once or not at all?
Once, and that's the one that I was just having a hard time with the sensation.
That's right. That's right.
The room was a little cold.
Well, that's why we bought a heater.
And if you don't know this, if your skin is cold, spanking hurts more.
It's a lot worse.
And so I think that the room was just a little cold.
And that may sound like a duh, but I'm telling you, it wasn't as obvious to us as we thought it was going to be.
Well, and I even knew that, but going into it, I was like, oh, it's fine. And it was a lot more intense.
Not what we thought.
But anyway, is there anything else that you want to say on the topic of safe words?
No, I just think that if this is something, just to reestablish what you've already said, but if this is something that you haven't talked with your partner, you do it. Like, if this is, because if you're struggling in your relationship in any way, this could be it. This could be it. I mean, you don't know. But this is another thing that we always go back to, have these conversations. Don't let it go by the wayside. If your relationship's fine right now and you're like, oh, we don't need to talk about this. Nope, still talk about it. Like, I would encourage you to still talk about it because I think it eventually is going to come up. So why wait till it becomes a problem? Just talk about it.
What's the old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure?
Exactly. Just that's why we get the car's oil changed on time so we don't have engine problems.
Oh, well, and that's why we have maintenance spankings, so we don't end up in a punishment scenario.
Yes, exactly.
So all I would say to conclude is have the conversation like you were saying, establish a safe word, and then if a safe word needs to be used or if there needs to be a pause, do that. Pause, check in, figure out what's going on, figure out how to proceed. Do you need to just call it? Does it just need to be done over? Do you need to take 10, 15 minutes and come back to it? Do you need to take a day and come back to it? Respect those safe words. Respect the needs of your partner. Just because you have authority doesn't mean that you get to decide what's best for them in that moment. Listen to them. Listen to what they're saying. If they're saying they need to take a break, take that break. But ladies, don't abuse those safe words. Don't use safe words as a way to get out of a punishment. That's not respectful of the dynamic. That's not respectful of your husband. You asked for this authority, or at least you agreed to having his authority over you, and you need to respect that by not using or misusing safe words. And I think that really does sum it up.
Yeah, we did it. That was a good sum up. That was better than mine. That was good.
So just to remind you guys, if you are on Instagram, you can follow our Instagram page at _disciplined life. And if you're not already on our Patreon, check out our Patreon. You get early access to these podcast episodes as well as many other perks depending on which tier you choose. And is there anything else?
No, I think that covers it. And if you've been listening to, I just want to establish just a quick technical thing as the producer. If you're noticing some difference in audio quality in some of these episodes, that's why we're trying to figure out what's working, what's not working. So if you hear something that sounds a little weird, we are aware of it. We're just slowly trying to figure out how to get the best sound. So just be patient with us, but I hope that you guys have been enjoying the content and that the quality hasn't been too bad, that it's been good. So, but just bear with us.
All right, guys. See you next time.